I visited my parents for Christmas last year. It had been snowing since October, so my dad helped me switch over to winter tires over a month earlier. That made me think I didn't have to worry much about road conditions. My family and I had a wonderful Christmas together, but I had plans to go on vacation with a friend the following day. Our flight was scheduled for that afternoon. I left in the early morning when it was still dark out, so I could have ample time to prepare for the trip and arrive at the airport. Unfortunately, I hadn't paid enough attention to how much snow had fallen the previous night. I quickly realized that the winter tires alone might not cut it, but I was determined to get home. Once there, I could just get a ride. Unfortunately, there was a dark and lonely 20 miles between me and my destination. I pressed on at a cautious speed. Everything seemed fine, until I crossed over a small bridge. Then, out of nowhere, I hit a patch of black ice. My car rotated one way and started sliding the other way, completely out of my control. I rammed into a pile of snow underneath. But thankfully, I wasn't going fast enough to cause any damage to the car. On the other hand, the snow caved in under one tire, causing me to get stuck. I tried not to panic. I had never had to get myself out of snow before, but my dad told me how. When I stepped out, though, all my confidence was blown away by the brutally cold wind and the realization that I was completely alone on that stretch of road. When I refocused, I grabbed all the floor mats from the back seat and the box of cat litter from the trunk. I got on my hands and knees and cleared a path for my back tires, packing down the softer snow into hard ice. I laid down the litter with mats and tried as hard as I could to cram them under the tires. I was working under the light of a single flashlight, feeling like I was on a fast track to hypothermia as my fingers started to get stiff and my face went numb. Just as I was ready to give it a try, I saw a pair of headlights approaching behind me. I flagged them down, trying to warn them about the ice. They seemed to go over it with no problem, and as they pulled over next to me, I saw that they had chains on their tires. It was another larger SUV, driven by a scruffy middle-aged man with gloves on who offered to help. I declined, saying I was already taking care of it. But then he took a glance at my setup and said there was no chance of that working. He hopped out of his car, revealing a stained jacket over a large gun, saying he'd help tow me from the ditch. I told him again that I had things handled, but he glared at me, demeaning. He said a little lady like me couldn't handle anything on her own, and that I was no good to anyone if I froze to death. I was offended. My teeth were chattering so much I couldn't go off on him for being such a chauvinist, and what I could get out was lost in the wind. All I could do was watch him pop open his trunk and pull out a long chain, which he looped through an attachment point under the front bumper of my car. Then, he told me to kneel there and hold it while he grabbed something to lock it in place. I managed to ask him why he didn't just tie the chain in a knot, but he snapped at me asking if I knew anything about towing cars. I tried to snap back by saying I never asked him for a tow, but he pointed at my floor mats and cat litter and said it was the stupidest, most brain-dead method of getting out of snow. If he left, he said I'd be stuck there all morning until the snowplows came to bury me. In the freezing cold, looking at my handiwork once again, I had to admit the tow seemed like a better option. I swallowed my pride and did as he said, kneeling at the hood of the car with the chain in my hands. A moment later, the man returned, handing me an open padlock. I noticed he was holding one hand behind his back, which as he stood looming over me, was no good omen. My inner voice was screaming at me at this point that my initial feelings about this guy were right. However, I tried to keep going along with things while still being extra cautious. So I kept one eye on him as I turned away to secure the chain. I only got the lock through one link before I saw him raise his arms over his head out of the corner of my eye. I looked over my shoulder and saw a hammer ready to strike me in the back of the head. I quickly jumped out of the way just before he slammed it into the bumper. I yanked the chain out from under my car, whipping it across his face as he went to hit me again. He shouted in pain as I ran around to the passenger side, jumping in and locking the doors just moments before he reached the window and started hammering the glass. I crawled over to the driver's seat, praying I wouldn't be stuck. I heard my dad's voice again saying, "Don't floor it." So against my panicking instincts, I feathered the throttle until I felt the tires catch. And then I finally slammed on the gas pedal. I roared out of the ditch, speeding off to safety. The creep didn't come after me, but he smashed my window. When I got home, I called the police immediately and reported everything. But since I didn't have the license plate, they didn't really do much. The rest of my day was very strange, trying to go through with my trip after what happened. It's horrible to think that there's a kind of person in this world that goes around looking for people in need of help, just to take advantage of their vulnerability.